In the previous episode, we stood in the marble-lit theater of ancient Macedonia and watched a king fall not in battle, but at his daughter's wedding. Philip II, the father of Alexander the Great, was struck down by a dagger in the crowd. It was not just a murder, it was a coronation, because in the blood of the father rose the fury of the son. Today we leave the world of swords and empires and step into the shadows of modern espionage, a world where the weapons are invisible and the assassins wear suits, not armor. This is the story of Alexander Litvinenko, a man who dared to speak against the Kremlin and paid with his life. It was a cold November afternoon in London, 2006. A man sat in the corner of the Millennium Hotel's Pine Bar, sipping tea. He was calm, but his eyes scanned the room like a soldier who had learned never to trust the quiet. His name was Alexander Litvinenko, former officer of the Russian FSB defector, whistleblower, enemy of the Kremlin. Within hours, his body would begin to fail. Within weeks, he would be dead. And the weapon was something no one could see, smell, or taste. A speck of radioactive polonium-210, enough to kill a man 1,000 times over, now coursing through his veins. This was not just an assassination, it was a message, a reminder to every dissident that the long arm of Moscow could reach them anywhere, even in the heart of London. He was born in 1962 in the Soviet city of Voronezh, a boy who would grow up in the shadow of the Cold War. From a young age, he was drawn to the discipline of the military, joining the Soviet Army at 17 and later attending a military academy. But his real journey into the world of shadows began in 1988, when he was recruited into the KGB. The KGB, Komitet Gosudarstvenoi Bezopasnosti, was the Soviet Union's all-powerful security and intelligence agency. It was more than just spies in trench coats. It was the sword and shield of the Communist Party. Its reach extended from foreign espionage to domestic surveillance, from hunting Western agents to silencing dissent at home. To be in the KGB was to serve at the very core of Soviet power. Litvinenko started in military counterintelligence, tracking foreign operatives and protecting state secrets. But as the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the KGB itself was dismantled. From its ashes rose the FSB, the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation, inheriting the domestic security role of the KGB while leaving foreign intelligence to a separate agency, the SVR. The FSB was officially a modern security service, but in reality it carried the DNA of its predecessor. Same buildings, same methods, same culture of secrecy and control. By the mid-1990s, Litvinenko had risen to lieutenant colonel in the FSB's Organized Crime Control Directorate. This was no ordinary police work. Post-Soviet Russia was a storm of oligarchs, mafia bosses, and corrupt officials. The FSB's job was to fight organized crime and terrorism, but Litvinenko claimed it was also used for contract killings, extortion, and political intimidation. In 1998, he did the unthinkable. He called a press conference in Moscow, flanked by fellow officers wearing balaclavas, and accused his own superiors of ordering him to assassinate the billionaire Boris Berezovsky. Berezovsky was no saint, a powerful oligarch with deep political ties, but he had fallen out with Vladimir Putin, then the head of the FSB. By making these accusations public, Litvinenko had crossed a line that no one in the Russian security services was supposed to cross. The FSB arrested him on charges of corruption and kidnapping. The cases collapsed, but he was rearrested again and again until it became clear he would not survive the system he had exposed. In 2000, he fled to London with his wife Marina and their young son. There he was granted asylum and began working for Berezovsky's security team while continuing to write and speak against the Kremlin. In exile, Litvinenko published books accusing the FSB of orchestrating political assassinations and even staging terrorist attacks to justify war in Chechnya. He named names. He accused Putin himself of corruption and complicity in mass killings. Every word he spoke made him more of a target. For the Kremlin, he was not just a defector, he was a traitor with a megaphone. And in the world of intelligence services, whether KGB or FSB, traitors are not forgiven. By November 2006, the long arm of Moscow had reached across borders and oceans to find him in London. The weapon was not a gun or a knife, but a microscopic dose of polonium. 210 slipped into his tea at the Millennium Hotel, a poison so rare and so deadly that its very use was a signature, a calling card only a state could afford to play. As his body failed over the next 3 weeks, Litvinenko accused Putin directly from his hospital bed. His hair fell out, his skin turned sallow, and the Geiger counters clicked furiously around him. He died on November 23, 2006, leaving behind a widow, a son, and a warning written in his own blood. The KGB had been the sword and shield of the Soviet state. The FSB had inherited its blade, and Alexander Litvinenko had been cut down by the very weapon he once wielded. It was November 1st, 2006. London was wrapped in a damp gray fog, the kind that clings to your coat and makes the streetlights look like halos in the mist. Inside the Millennium Hotel's Pine Bar, the air was warm, heavy with the scent of polished wood and bergamot tea. Alexander Litvinenko sat at a corner table, his back to the wall, his eyes scanning the room with the quiet paranoia of a man who knows he is being hunted. On the table before him, 2 cups of tea steam curling lazily into the air. Across from him sat 2 men, Andrei Lugovoy and Dmitry Kovtun, both former KGB operatives now moving in the murky world between business and espionage. They smiled too easily, their voices low, their hands steady. To anyone watching it, looked like an ordinary meeting between old acquaintances. But somewhere between the handshake and the last sip of tea, death had already been served. The poison was invisible, polonium-210, a radioactive isotope so rare it could only come from a nuclear facility. A few microscopic grains dissolved into the amber liquid. No taste, no smell, no warning. Litvinenko left the hotel into the chill of the London evening. The city hummed around him, buses groaning down wet streets, neon signs flickering in the drizzle. But inside his body, the clock had started ticking. Hours later, nausea hit like a wave. By nightfall, he was vomiting violently, his muscles aching, his skin burning from within. Doctors at Barnet Hospital were baffled. Tests showed nothing familiar, no common toxin, no bacterial infection. Days passed. His hair began to fall out in clumps. His skin turned a waxy yellow. Specialists brought in Geiger counters, and the devices screamed to life around his bed. The room was evacuated. The diagnosis was clear: acute radiation poisoning. Scotland Yard's counter-terrorism unit traced the contamination like a trail of ghostly fingerprints. From the Pine Bar to hotel rooms to airplane seats. Everywhere Lugovoy and Kovtun had been, the Geiger counters clicked like a metronome of death. In his hospital bed, Litvinenko's voice was weak, but his words were sharp. He accused Vladimir Putin directly of ordering his murder. Photographers captured him bald, gaunt, wrapped in white sheets, his eyes still burning with defiance. On November 23, 2006, the clock ran out. Litvinenko's heart stopped. The autopsy revealed radiation levels so high that his body was treated as hazardous waste. The message was clear. This was not just an assassination. It was a signature, a warning written in a poison only a state could wield. The death of Alexander Litvinenko did not end in the hospital room. It detonated in the halls of power from London to Moscow. Within days, Scotland Yard named two suspects, Andrei Lugovoy and Dmitry Kovtun, both former KGB operatives. The trail of polonium they left behind was like a radioactive map of the assassination. From the Pine Bar to hotel rooms to airplane seats, the evidence glowed under Geiger counters like embers in the dark. The British government demanded their extradition. Moscow refused. The diplomatic temperature dropped to near freezing. In 2007, the UK expelled 4 Russian diplomats. Russia responded in kind. The two countries entered a cold hostility that never truly thawed. For years, the case simmered in the background of UK-Russia relations. Then, in 2016, a British public inquiry concluded that the killing was probably approved by the head of the FSB and by President Vladimir Putin himself. The Kremlin called it nonsense. But the message was already clear. This was not a rogue act. It was a state operation carried out with a weapon so rare and so deadly that only a government could have deployed it. Internationally, the assassination sent a chill through the world of intelligence and diplomacy. It showed that the old rules of the Cold War, the unspoken limits, were gone. That political killings could be carried out in broad daylight on foreign soil with weapons designed to terrify as much as to kill. For dissidents and defectors, it was a warning. For governments, it was a test. How far would they go to confront a nuclear power over the death of one man? In 2021, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that Russia was responsible for the assassination and ordered it to pay damages to Litvinenko's widow. Moscow ignored the ruling. The wound remained open. Today, the name Litvinenko is more than a headline. It is a symbol of the price of speaking out. A reminder that in the shadow world of espionage, the reach of the state is long, the memory of betrayal is longer, and justice is often the first casualty.